It's doing the same stupid thing that it did to me before. But I think the audio is going to work now. I think it was a Safari issue. I was on Safari, and apparently I've never had any problems with it. I've always used Safari in the past, never had any problems whatsoever. And this time, apparently they've changed something. Now it has to be Chrome, and yeah. So I've got everything moved over to Chrome. Had to log in, do all that stuff. So I'll give it a few minutes here, let everybody hop in, and then we'll get it going. I tested it. Cable from the chat hopped in for a minute, and he confirmed that yes, it is working. It does look right, and he was able to hear the audio. So here, I'll test it real quick. Make sure you guys can hear it.
Weaker peoples, come on, you're a modernist. You can't.
Let me know if you guys heard that. If you didn't, I'm gonna pull my frickin' hair out. I'm putting this on 1.5x speed because, especially now, there's been a bit of a delay here, and I need to get through this. So if you guys can't handle the okay, great, audio sounds good. If you guys can't handle the 1.5x, then I'm sorry. You can slow it down. You can come back and listen to it later and slow it down. Audio is good. All right. So give it another second here for everybody else to hop in. Da, 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 da. Let me post this in the Discord. New stream, everyone. All right. Which, speaking of, if you guys are not a part of the Discord, then you can go to subscribestar.com/kingpilled, and you can sign up, become a supporting listener of the show, and you can join the awesome King Pilled Discord, where there's one channel there. If you sign up at the King level, there's one channel there where I will drop the link. I already dropped the link for this stream here. So toward the end of the stream, you can hop on and have a chat or ask me questions or whatever you want to do. It's one of the perks when you sign up as a supporting listener at the King tier. All right, so I think everything looks good now. Hopefully everything is working. What's up, Silverpie? Thank you. Hope you're doing well as well. Okay, so we're going to get this started here. And if there are any issues, then go leave a review for the manager. I'm going to get this started.
Can't be completely thinking that's extreme.
Let me put it this way. Say, for example, we think about a boxing match, all right? And we think about the experience of two fighters, and one of them is defensive, and he's sort of standing in the corner, and he's waiting to like box when the guy runs out and attacks him and all this. Now, the other guy is assertive. So the other guy has this like sadistic idea, and like sadistic may be the wrong, strong word, but he's going to assert himself upon this person. He's the person who feels inside of him that I want to defeat this guy. I want to take the wealth for this boxing match. I want to be the winner. I want to be the guy who gets the fame and the adoration and all this type of stuff. And he puts his best foot forward. He launches himself upon that man. He defeats him, and he takes everything, and he takes the victory and all these types of things. Now, of course, he actually achieves this success tangibly in the world. And it's very dangerous to, if you're a boxing coach, to realize that you've got a fighter. This fighter is going into a game, boxing, which requires you to win. And if you go in and you coach your fighter to be this maybe romantic or idealistic idea that we should be pacifists, or I'm not saying you're saying that, but we should be timid, or we shouldn't maybe, unless that guy punches you, don't punch him back or something like this. If you develop this sort of like too tender of an attitude, you can put him.
Just to be clear, the part of the reason I'm just letting this play for right now and I'm starting it as where I am is so you've got the full context for the coming conversation. So I'm going to let it play here for a little ways before I hop in and give some thoughts. But you kind of needed they're going back and forth responding to each other, so you kind of needed the back and forth here.
Put him in a very bad position. What if it's like the just rules of engagement thing? If you wait for the other person to hit you first, they might damage you so bad you can't even compete properly. Whereas if you go and you just launch yourself upon them, and you become the, like as Nietzsche would say, the creator, the person who trusts your instincts and puts the first move forward, not the reactionary, the one who's asserting themselves, you achieve something quite good in that sense. And this would be a sort of form of his argument of like justifying your own passions and understanding that they have an aggressive inside of them. They have an aggressive instinct inside of them that wants to launch yourself upon the world. And you should affirm that, embrace that. It's part of who you are. It's part of life. To try and moralize that out is very suspicious and could put you actually in a very dangerous position. And so, for example, in the West, you could could look at the West and you could say maybe our problem is that we need to go back to Christianity and relinquish our aggression. Or you could also turn around and say, for example, we've lost our assertive master skills. We've lost our ability to trust our conquering instincts. When we were Christian, we sort of had a good conscience about those despite that. And that allowed us to take over the world and put us in a dominant position. Now what's happening is that we've got all these people that used to be the colonies of the West. We've got these Irish people, we've got these people from all across the world, and they're full of resentment. And we live like this game is not a fair game. It's a bad game. And they're coming to get us. And they don't seem very happy. And it kind of comes to a point where it's like, I'd love them to scapegoat that resentment and stop it. But I have a feeling that's not going to happen. I have a feeling that it's just going to keep on spiraling. At what point do we sort of say to ourselves, I'm not going to be in the reactionary position. I've got to sort of say to myself, right, I'm fucking done dealing with this problem. We've got a load of people bickering and complaining and trying to drag us down. It's like the Romans dealing with the Judeans. They're trying to drag us down into some petty fight. And the Romans are putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. And then eventually you have to turn around and say, well, you know what, fuck you. I'm going to put the foot down and I'm going to assert the reality that I see. And I'm going to trust my guts and all this. Now,
What's that going to look like?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know the exact details.
Take it out of the abstract and tell me what you're talking about. I can give you some actual things too, so I won't keep it abstract too for my solution.
No worries. Well, look, I would
give me some action points. What are you talking about?
I would say one of the main things is looking at the institutions that we have and starting to develop a sort of counter set of assertions to say, for example, the egalitarian hires, like the diversity hires and stuff like this. That stuff has to go. There has to be an assertion of like, these are our institutions. When we were running them, we created a high culture, we created modern medicine, we created all these type of things. An assertion of us, like a sort of confidence and pride in ourselves, pushing us into our institutions. For example, allowing us to...
Are you talking about our as in Irish people taking back what they want in Ireland? Like that?
I would say Western culture generally. It's almost like Christendom, but extended to the concept of Western culture, because I know like Protestants and Catholics and all that would go together.
And they're going to have, but who's going to determine what's our thing when we've got so many different, like you said, the Irish have all this resentment to the English and all this stuff, and British or whatever these people.
So this is a good question. Again, this is something that you could look at, like, this is like a demographic political identity question, but like, could you say Western people? Could you say European people? I don't really know. Like, I'm not sure exactly the way that we could put it, but say we go with something like Western people. I'm not sure if that's going to be the one that works in the end. Then we have this question of like, all right, Western people are massively demoralized. They are infected by the resentment, the guilt that has been put on them by resentful people who don't like them for historical grievances and various things like this. Now, in order for them to flip that on its head and get out of that flux and start to assert themselves and put their best foot forward, they need to shackle off the guilt. They need to say to themselves, I'm not going to have a negatively premised identity that I was an evil, tyrannical colonizer. I was the people who created the cathedrals. We were the people who created all these type of things. We were the people who created medicine. We were the people who blazed forward the path for the world.
But what was the advantage they had that allowed them to do some of those advancements?
Well, I would say the advantage would be that they are an extremely...
All right, this is where Gronowski starts dropping some firebombs here. I think first of all, this perspective that Uber Boyo is expressing here it's one that I'm very sympathetic to, but I also I see what's motivating it, and I don't excuse me, burp. I see what's motivating it, and I think it's as Gronowski is going to point out here, he's not assessing it properly, and I don't think that's a critique of Uber Boyo necessarily. I think he's never been able to see the Christian story in the way that especially Gronowski is going to present it here in just a minute. I think that the just to sidetrack, I guess, briefly and get on a bit of a rant. The idea of a Western identity is something that just seems incoherent to me. It seems so excessively broad that I understand what they're trying to get at. I understand really what they're looking for is Christendom, but then they've got the kind of the pagan misappropriations of like the neo-pagan misappropriations of some Greek thought that is kind of mixed in there as well. You've got Evola, Nietzsche, and you've got some of this other stuff there. But the idea of a Western identity just seems. I felt so pulled toward it for a long time, and I self-identified with it for such a long time. But then it's so you can subdivide it into so many different constituent pieces that it has almost becomes meaningless. I mean, even within, like, directly here with Uber Boyo, he's Irish and English, and Irish and English are supposed to both be part of the Western identity, but they're like the most antagonistic toward each other of just about any two people groups in the world. And they're getting less so that way, but I think he would see that as a bad thing. I think he doesn't want to see them being kind of sublimated into each other. He wants them to maintain that distinction, the Irish-English distinction. But then if you're going to maintain an Irish English distinction and that distinction is going to be meaningful, then I think it renders something like a Western identity as meaningless. But I'm sympathetic, and I know what they're trying to drive at. They're trying to drive at Christendom. That's what they're feeling pulled to is actually Christendom, and I say that in a positive sense. But they have to get some of this neo-pagan mumbo jumbo out of there, and I think that's the little bit of dog shit that makes the brownies makes you throw the brownies out. Like, yeah, maybe it's 98% chocolate and only 2% dog shit, but you're still not going to eat them. That's the in this kind of Deus Vult online trad. Yeah, that whole ethos is just, it just seems like a cope to me, and it's one that I tried on for a while. It's one that I kind of tried to fit my mind into, and I couldn't do it without it just feeling like cope. Because I think that there's a better perspective, and that's one that Gornowski is going to get into over the next 15 or 20 minutes of the video here.
Witches.
Well, all right, fair enough.
Right?
Well, I would forward the path for the world.
What was the advantage they had that allowed them to do some of those advancements?
Well, I would say the advantage would be that they are an extremely natural.
Witches.
Well, all right, fair enough.
Right? I'm not one of those persons I'm not saying that there was no technological advances before Christianity took hold. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying what really sped things up.
Yeah, well, maybe it was that. Like, I would, like you.
Yeah, Joshua. He sounds to me like he's trying to say white people without saying white. I think that's what it is. I think he's recognizing that he needs to be careful in what he says here in part, and I think he also recognizes that white people is just as, see, I think Western identity is kind of like the thing that people move to when they're like, white people is either too socially toxic, or they recognize that this is oversimplified, that this is kind of a useless term when you start really trying to put feet on it. When you really start trying to make the idea do work for you, it kind of breaks down. So I think that the Western identity is kind of like the people who are trying to make the same point, but they're trying to kind of detach themselves because they recognize the shortcomings with the strictly racial analysis. But I think that, as Joshua says here, Christendom without Christ is really what they're trying to build, and they're recognizing there's something that's missing, and they're recognizing that there's something that should be uniting us. There's something that does unite us, but they're not, because they don't have the whole picture. They don't have the proper anthropology. Then they're starting to fall off the wayside. There's an idea I've been kind of thinking about lately. It's almost like you might say that what, like, popular Christianity today is almost like pagan Christianity. It's like if pagans paganized Christianity and had a pagan version of Christianity. I don't want to make it sound like, well, this is a form of Christianity. It's like a Christianity. So it's not actually Christian, but it's kind of like wearing Christianity as a costume. But it's pagan. They have the pagan view of the world. But it's Christian as well. And I understand that there's historical baggage where you actually can't really say that, but I'm just speaking kind of analogically. All right, let's keep going with this.
When you stop burning witches, you start to take a look at that growth on that dead body in the field from the plague. You say, what the hell is that? Maybe we could get a glass. You got a piece of glass there, bloke? And you zoom in on that and say, oh, God, look at that thing growing on there. Is there any way we could develop something to stop that? After we've burnt Martha the 5th year in a row, it didn't work. Good God, is there anything else that might be a little better than hearing Martha screams for the 5th year? The crop didn't come. We need to try something else. You have that process, right? So violence retards society. Let's put it that way. That's my response to it. Is that, the whole idea of having a boxing match in the first place is a vestige of a sacrificial ritual that people use to create order and meaning in their society. That was child's play. Now we have to be adults. Now we have to be Christians. Now we have to put away things of the child. That's what the Paul talks about. God winked at our ignorance in our pagan past. He let us have our time to try to construct society based on the noble lie of trying to have a scapegoat that we could project into the sky and call it our God and tell us every now and then to have another sacrifice in his honor to continually preserve society. We don't have that anymore. We were bowling with bumpers, and now the bumpers are off, and we've got to land the strike or we're going to perish. That's what the whole point of Jesus' story is. He's coming with a sword, and you can't roll that back. And I think that's why Nietzsche lost his mind. He wanted to roll it back, but how can you roll it back? How can I mean, what do you want? Do you want to have children putting in, children put in the situation they were put in the Roman times? Do you want that?
No, but
No,
I guess
nobody wants that. So we're, how Nietzschean do we have to get the good old days back? That's what I want to know from that.
I'm not necessarily talking about the good old days. I do understand your point though. But like, look, two caveats, and maybe it might get redundant if we dig into this stuff too much. But there's a way you could look at history, and you could say to yourself, as the European people are particularly talented and special. Like when we were pagan, we built the Roman Empire. When we were Christian, we took over the world basically. And as we stopped being Christian as severely as we were before, as we hit the Renaissance, the church started, people started to doubt the church. This starts to steamroll into the Enlightenment. It was as we started to go into the Enlightenment that we started to see the true rise of science and the true beginning of those processes. Now, Nietzsche would argue, because Richard Dawkins would be like, it's because we got rid of the superstitious Christianity that happened. But Nietzsche would argue that Christianity and its monk instincts trained us to be very, very penetrative in our thinking, which actually laid the foundation for science. And as we evolved into the
This is kind of a rough spot to pause this, but I've got this thought going right now, and I've been letting it play for a long time, so I want to break it up. There's not really good places to pause a lot of this because both of these guys are just fucking sharp as whips. They are just they barely take a breath with each other, just going back and forth. One of the things here that you could construe this, what I'm about to say here, as a critique of Roman Catholicism, and that's probably fair. But I'm not saying it just for the sake of critiquing Roman Catholicism. A lot of what I hear from Uberboyo is he's very well read, and he understands Christianity better than most Christians. But the Christianity he's been exposed to is Western Christianity. As I obviously I'm a baptized Orthodox Christian. I am not a Roman Catholic, but I don't see Roman Catholicism as hostile to me, and I don't see myself as hostile to Roman Catholicism. I believe the Orthodox Church is the true church. I believe that, so I'm not qualifying that, but I see myself having far more in common with Roman Catholics than I do with virtually every other religious group. However, there are some very, very significant differences, profound differences between Roman Catholic theology and Orthodox theology. And a lot of it bears out in anthropology. And you can see the Christianity that Uberboyo is operating from, is the Christian lens that he's operating, that he's seeing the world through, is a Roman Catholic Christian world. He recognizes properly that the Renaissance, the Reformation, the Renaissance were the weakenings of Christianity. He sees that as like kind of like a downswing. But the thing is, that wasn't Christianity. That wasn't the only Christianity on the scene. There's a whole Christian world and a whole Christian experience that he's not aware of, just because he's not generally aware of Orthodoxy. This is the same thing that I went through. I thought a lot like the way he's thinking, the way he's approaching this. And I think he's very sincere in the way he's doing it. But when he talks about like that Rome, talking about Rome building the world as pagans, so many of the accomplishments of the so-called Roman Empire came after it was Christianized. But that Christianization persisted outside Rome much more pervasively and much longer than it did in Rome. There's a deep, rich Christian history in the East that isn't really in the West. Things didn't fall off and devolve in the same way in the East as it did in the West. The East has had its own problems, but there's a conception or a lens or a an experience of Christianity in the East that doesn't really exist in the West. It's been preserved in the East in a certain way that I have never encountered it in the West, and I've heard many other people say they've never encountered it in the West, and it seems like it doesn't really exist in the West. Um, for more on that, like I would really encourage you to go listen to this whole conversation. I mean, I started it 2 hours into the conversation. Uh, David Gronowski makes a fantastic point about um, Western Christianity being a heady religion. It's very intellectual. It's very cognitive, but it's not incarnational. There isn't an incarnation of it. It hasn't been incarnated in the same way. Incarnated, literally embodied. And that incarnational Christianity requires proper Christian anthropology. And the West has lost most of their proper Christian anthropology, and it's been preserved more coherently, cohesively, and extensively in the East. So, just some thoughts that were kind of provoked as I'm listening through here. I'll keep it going.
Kind of modern era, this is when we conquered the whole world. We set up the whole project of science. We blistered through medicine. We discovered all these things like how to stop infants dying, how to make penicillin. We discovered obviously how to.
What was the animating energy? You want to talk about energy? What was the animating energy for trying to help infants? For building a hospital that would take anybody in, whether you were a dirty Irishman or a royal British English dude. What was the thing that allowed you to get your wound healed, and what was the thing that allowed your child to be recovered and taken care of as an infant? The animating energy from all of that was the revelation of the slain lamb. That was the animating energy, right? And the question is, you can't roll back that energy. That's the point Jesus is prophesying. He's predicting that in history, that you can't undo it. Once you have it, it will infect you. So you either have to go with it the right way, or you try to roll it back, it's just going to flatten you. It's just going to crush you.
Well, then the question all right, it's a good point, but something I see the Nietzschean perspective pointing out.
The point that Gornowski is making here is all of this stuff that Uberboyo sees as and attributes to the West or European identity or something along those lines is really the historical outworking of the impact of Christ on the human experience. Having God take on humanity, bind himself eternally to humanity, fundamentally changed what it means to be human, what it means to have a human experience. And that's a historical event that didn't happen theoretically. It wasn't just a story. It's a thing that actually happened, and it fundamentally changed the nature of time and space and our experience of it. I'm not saying that perspective doesn't exist in the West, or someone in the West wouldn't recognize that or understand that or come to that conclusion themselves. But that is an aspect that the anthropology of Christianity, as preserved most purely, in my opinion, in the East, is one of the biggest things that is missing in the West. That's one of that is the linchpin of all of the degeneracy and the corruption that we see in the world around us.
Now, that's a scary one, is that animating energy to help everybody with medicine and all this might be a way that we're shooting ourselves in the foot in the West, because let me complete the thought. Yeah. We're special. Now, maybe you'll disagree with this, but let's just run with the idea. The Western people, highly creative, scientifically brilliant, produced the high civilization that rules the world at the moment. Our Christian instincts, because we are taught to be so care about the lamb all across the world, like as Nietzsche would call this, we call this the slave morality. We believe in the lamb all across the world, is actually very dangerous for us at this moment, because now what's happening is that we've got this like guilty conscience where we're not good enough. We need to sacrifice all of our creative powers towards lifting up the minorities or the ex-colonies or something like this. And the problem is that they kind of resent us. They're full of vengeance and bitterness, and they're not any more developed than we are psychologically. And so it's almost like we're sacrificing this whole high civilization to try pass it on to other people who are just going to run it into the ground, and any anything they use out of it is probably going to use to turn around and ruin us. And to give you a tangible example of this, look at the way Elon Musk has reacted with Twitter. He was sitting in there in America, and he was an idealistic Westerner, a very liberal, free, idealistic, good-hearted Westerner. And I think he's a good representation of our spirit. And he wanted to go to space, and he wanted to be Tesla. He wanted to build things that help the world. That's our spirit at the biggest way.
Yeah.
But he was living in America in the last 10 years, and he realized that the government was starting to come in and say, you have to hire people not on their capacity or their competence or their merit. You have to hire them based on this resentment. You have to hire them based on this injustice from the past and stuff like this. And again, I understand that that's like could be a problem of the scapegoat mechanism and all this, but you see Elon sort of like stop abstracting about it, and he's like, actually, I'm just pulling the trigger. I'm going to take over Twitter. I'm going to make sure that there's an outlet that we can talk about this to make sure this doesn't happen, because we're not going to space if I'm forced to hire someone who's not good enough for their position. I'm not sending people to the fucking moon when we don't have a rocket ship that's properly designed.
That's a Christian. Again, so you said they're racked by guilt, right? That's the point, is that a society that encounters the gospel but doubles down on its evil and doesn't repent is going to be racked with guilt.
Okay, Gornowski's going to say this way better than I ever could, so I'm going to let him do that in just a sec here. But I want to highlight what's happening here, where Uber Boyo is describing the type of behavior that he wants to see. He's describing the type of behavior that he thinks is the ideal way to move forward, the optimal way to embody what he's considering the Western spirit. And what Gornowski is going to point out here is how, without even realizing it, he is yearning after the embodiment of true Christianity. What he's identifying as Christianity is not actually Christianity. His perception of Christianity, which is tinged by him coming from this kind of neo-pagan, Nietzschean, Ubermensch kind of the view of the world, which what I've seen with him, he seems like he's very sincere and very open-minded, and I don't want to denigrate where he's coming from. I'm just trying to describe it. I'm trying to just point at it. What Uber Boyo thinks Christianity is a degenerate form of Christianity. And what he is yearning for is a true expression of Christianity. And he doesn't realize that what he is seeing is his critique of what is actually a degenerate form of Christianity is that it's not a true form of Christianity. That's the critique he's making without realizing it. I think without realizing it. It seems like he doesn't. And so then Gornowski is going to go on here to illustrate this and point this out. And this is where I really wanted to get to, was the vision that David points out of what it means to be a Christian, what it should mean to be a Christian, how a Christian should operate in the modern world. And it is the opposite of black-pilled. It's actually exceptionally white-pilled, and is it'll relate to the thing that I said earlier about the question I had of what would you be doing in Ancapistan, and why are you not doing that now? So what would you be doing in Christendom, and why are you not doing that now? Keep that in mind as we're moving forward here. I think it's probably another 208. I think it was probably 221, 222 is about where I'd stopped it. So we got another 13 minutes or so.
Right. So, Ivan Illich, remember him? He wrote some of these, he was a priest, he passed away, but he had books about schooling and hospitals and medicalization, IVANILLICH. And ILLICH. But look up some of his stuff, because he talks about the corruption of the best is the worst, about how Christianity has been corrupted and created into this bureaucratization of medicine, right? Medical is creating this sterile bureaucracy that takes these things that you're talking about and Nietzsche was talking about and institutionalizes them into these kind of like low energy institutions that are grinding us into oblivion. But he wanted to recover the best part of Christianity, which is close to kind of what I'm talking about. And he talks about the Good Samaritan. It's an agency thing. Let's go back to that. You can't bureaucratize and create some kind of labyrinthine regulatory state based on Christianity. That is a total joke. And that's why America and the West is the way it is, because we are haunted by the cross, but we do not want to repent. Instead, we construct our own artificial martyr's purchase. The way I illustrate it is, those pictures where you have a painting of something at a fair and you can put your head in the back to get the photo, that you're a cowboy, or something. Well, we have a cross, a crucifixion, and this is the West. We put our heads in that little spot, right? And we say, all right, get the photo, right? Because we covet the martyr's perch that Jesus has in history, and we don't want to repent. So we're in a negative rivalrous relationship with Jesus rather than a positive one. Yeah. And once we start to have a positive imitational relationship with Jesus's actual action, instead of creating another ideological, metaphysical construct to go and debate with people about, we actually incarnate an action, and actually enact his way of dealing with things. We will have a hermeneutic of suspicion that will allow us to dispossess these different institutional power holds that have us enslaved in incorrect information. The medical system needs completely to be destroyed. It's completely corrupt. It's completely abysmal. But you can't overthrow it by some kind of Caesar. It will happen through people understanding, through what we have with media and internet and so forth, people starting to realize what they can do to reclaim their health, what they can do to reclaim their vitality, as you would say it. And these things will start to percolate, and people will either get on board with the truth and find the results of actually questioning the gods of the city and actually repenting, not just of guilt, but also repenting of ignorance, of trusting in institutions that are not God and that are not the things that we think they are, like the FDA, like the CDC, like these institutions, like you were mentioning Einstein. Einstein needs to be challenged. Einstein, in my opinion, is another Marduk, he's a real person, but I mean, he's been constructed, right? He's been turned into a god.
Okay, I got to pause this before he really gets going with this. Let me highlight something that Joshua Ham said here. He said, "This understanding of sacrificial love is the foundation of Christendom. Even if I don't like you, our mutual Father loves you, so I should treat you well to please Him." So David identifies what I was talking about, that what we see as Christianity today in primarily the way that it's being expressed in its most like caricatured, distorted form in the woke movement, but you can see the same caliber or same quality of distortions scattered out throughout other various identity groups or ideologies. They have the same general pattern, which is an obsession with victimhood, an obsession with being a victim, being victimized by your surroundings. Somehow everyone's out to get you. Everything is standing in your way. There's just distress and horror and terrible things all around you. And this is the responsibility of XYZ person or institution or whatever it is. And that, number one, that's not Christianity. That's a distortion of Christianity. That's taking Christ on the cross is not a victim. He put himself there. He chose to be there. He's not a victim. So identifying with your own victim status by default means you're not identifying with Christ. If you identify as a victim, if you identify as someone who has the odds stacked against you unjustly, then you're not identifying with Christ. This is not the spirit of Christ. The spirit of victimhood is not Christian. It's anti-Christian. It exists in the place of Christianity. And it's pretending to be Christianity, but it's not actually Christianity. This comment here by Joshua, then, that caring for the victim, caring for the downtrodden one, even if you don't have a personal attachment to them, is, even if you feel like you don't have a personal attachment to them, this is a manifestation of the person of Christ. Because he talks about how you have in the parable of the sheep and the goats, the end of time. He talks about when I was in prison, you didn't come visit me. When I was hungry, You didn't feed me. When I was cold, you didn't give me any clothes. When we interact with another human being, we are seeing an image of Christ because each person is an icon of Christ. When you interact with them, you are interacting with Christ by proxy through them. And those who at the end of I'm trying to put together several different thoughts here that all just crashed into my head at the same time. I was just talking with someone about this recently. This I'm not going to name them. I'm going to keep it just impersonal, but just talk about the ideas. We were talking about being judgmental, and um, this person was talking about struggling with this sense of being judgmental and feeling this urge constantly to point the finger at someone else. And while we were talking about it, it became clear that this person is also doing the same thing at like turned inwardly. So it was like there's this water cannon of being judgmental that projects out, and it just it has to be channeled somewhere and pointed somewhere. And there's a quote from Father Seraphim Rose where he says, "Always justify the sins of others, never justify your own sins." So in the spirit of that quote, we're talking about having this judgmentalness water cannon pointed at someone, and then, well, if you apply this knowledge of where you justify that person's sins, you can no longer point your judgmentalness water cannon at them. But then the natural urge is okay, pointed at the person. So that person, you justify their sin and you recognize that person is a victim. That person was victimized by their circumstances. If I was in that person's circumstances and had been victimized in the same way, I would have reacted in the same way. So that person's sins are justified. If I have this perspective that that person's sins are justified, well, then what happens? Well, as I'm talking this out with this person, the the person recognized that taking that water cannon off of that person, the person they directed it at, it went boop and it locked onto the people who had victimized that person. And then we talked about how, well, this can turn into an infinite regress because you keep going back. Each person that you're pointing it to, well, you have to justify that person's sins too. So the fact that they victimized someone else is not their fault. This isn't to say that people don't have responsibility for their actions. It's that this is the posture that we must have. Always justify the sins of others, never justify our own sins. And as we're talking about this judgmental water cannon, it was like, all right, well, where do I point this? Where does this water cannon go? Where do I direct it? And the first thought that popped into my head was, well, turn it in on yourself. Like, be judgmental toward yourself. But then I realized, no, that's not it either, because now you're not transcending this judgmental passion. You're not conquering it. You're just redirecting it. It turns out that this passion, they call them passions because they make you passive. They take control of you. You are no longer active. When you're submitted to your passions, you are passive. So this judgmental passion takes over this person, and it's either going to be pointed at someone else or it's going to be pointed right back inside. And something that Gornowski mentioned earlier in this episode is that I almost said the magic of the cross, and that would be a terrible phrase. The beauty of the cross is that you take this judgmental water cannon or whatever that passion is, whatever that thing is that has you antagonized by someone else and antagonizing that person. And you realize that when Christ died for us as a human, taking on humanity and dying for us, he was the innocent person who was victimized, for whom it was not just. There was no justice in his death. It was his death that justified us. And you realize he's hanging there and he's saying, take this judgmental water cannon and point it at me, because that's what you're doing. When you point your passions at someone else, you direct it at them and hold it on them, you're doing it to Christ hanging on the cross. That's the reality of the situation. That's the anthropological reality of the situation. And he hangs there while you judge him for the sins he is bearing, that he's taking from you. And then he says, I forgive you. And you come back around and you do it again. And you come back around and you do it again. And you keep doing it over and over and over again, because you're a human being. This is what it is. This is the human experience, is that you're going to continually realize that you are justifying your own sins, judging the sins of others, and in judging them, you are judging Christ himself hanging on the cross, dying for your sins. And you're going to be confronted with that reality. It's going to drop you to your knees. You're going to confess. You're going to repent. And then you're going to go on your merry way and think you've conquered that demon. And he's going to sneak in your back door. And next thing you know, you're going to be right back there again, doing it all over again. This is the cycle of confession and repentance. I mentioned that Lent was rough for me this year. This was the issue. This issue of confession and repentance was just dropped me to my knees. How did this tie into what you were talking about? So, fake Christianity. So this is the real Christianity. This fake Christianity that we have going on right now in all of its forms, from the kind of like the Murica goofballs or whatever, to radical woke people, all these different bizarre strains of Christianity that are floating around in our culture, virtually all atheistic, they completely secular. These are all not Christian because they're focused on the victimhood. They're obsessed with the victimhood status as they see it of Christ, and they're not seeing Christ as a conquering king. And that it's through justifying the sins of others and taking full responsibility for your own sins that you build a Christendom. This is the reality that David's going to start getting into here, that he's taking where Uber Boyo is coming from, this kind of Nietzschean will to power sense, where it's a matter of like fully leaning into and manifesting your own will, which is where greatness comes from. What Gornowski's pointing out here is, no, it's surrendering your own will. The surrender of your will and the pursuit of things that are transcendent is where power comes from. And he's got a big white pill going in here.
That can't be challenged. And there's all this mimetic conformity to the paradigm that he put in place that needs to be challenged. And only a Christian does that. Only a Christian has the courage to look at the gods of the city and to expose them as whitewashed tombs with dead bones inside. Only a Christian, truly imitating Jesus, has the courage to challenge the crowd and understand the crowd for what it really is. Nietzsche's just taking another side in the crowd fight. Jesus helps you get free from the crowd.
Are you sure Nietzsche sounds like a Christian in the way that you're describing it?
Yeah, but he wanted to return to something that was completely destroyed.
Why do you say he wanted to return? Because he definitely didn't. Like, he was very much like there's many things that you're saying that I find. Oh, okay. First of all, so what you see it as is we have this problem where like the Nietzschean analysis that I'm sort of saying is that the danger in the West is that the West is demoralized. Our understanding of ourselves is shackled with guilt. In order for us to go forward into the future, we need to honestly grapple with the fact that we're building a system around us that is actually just sublimating the psychological drama that's going on inside of us, and we're actually building a fucking prison around us like idiots that's going to be violent towards us perhaps, which is going to lead to a violence escalation that might be just absolutely crazy when we see it, sort of like communism type thing. And so you're saying that we need to go back and confront the true tragedy of Christ, the true struggle of Christ, and allow that to
It's not the tragedy, it's a comedy. The Gospels is it is. The comedies end with a banquet at the end of the story. That's what Revelation is. It's a beautiful banquet. The best is yet to come. See, you're talking like these. I mean, I don't know where this framework that you've been told from about what Christianity is about, but this is not what Christianity is about. The best is yet to come. We have to get out there and enact the truths of what we can do. And here's the thing. Let me put it this way. We have a gospel technology, and it allows us to stop using retarded forms of culture making, which is what we call sacrificial violence. And we have to find those different aspects of sacrificial violence that we're still participating in, still making excuses for, and repent of our participation in it, and then become a part of the community that bears witness to the truth that provides better solutions than the violence was provided before. So basically, I know this is kind of ad hoc, but the FDA is a mythically enclosed institution of sacrificial violence. They put people in rape cages if you defy what they determine to be what is medicine. What is the medicine for cancer? If you defy them, you will be put in a cage for that. That is a.
I need to go back and play these lines here, just a couple lines here one more time, because this is probably the most, the archetype of a David Gornofsky sentence.
And rape cages is a than the violence was provided before. So basically, I know this is kind of ad hoc, but the FDA is a mythically enclosed institution of sacrificial violence. They put people in rape cages if you defy what they determine to be what is medicine. What is the medicine for cancer? If you defy them, you will be put in a cage for that. That is a sacrificially enclosed structure. This is a religious entity that gets transcendent awe from people who say they're Christians and yet are whoring after false gods. So Christians have to understand how these false gods appear in our time today, how they're mimetically enclosed with all this awe that they don't deserve. And they don't deserve the same reverence and authority and don't touch this stuff attitude that we all kind of presuppose in the way we talk about society. We need to take a much more radical challenge to why we have these institutions that we have. I've laid out a few things that I want. We need to have elemental transmutation at room temperature. That means we need to be able to create technology that allows you to take elements that are this and turn them into elements that are that, to do rare earth elements, things that we need for technology. We need to have low temperature nuclear energy. We need to be able to have ocean water powering our energy of our homes or our neighborhoods or our communities, however we scale it, that allows us to not have to rely on the energy system that we currently have that's so mediated by this false scarcity framework. We need to have cures for cancer, diabetes. Most of those things can be solved by getting seed oils out of the food system.
Yes, let's go.
I've been talking about this for years. You get rid of the seed oils, you eliminate so many of the problems that we have, including mental health problems that afflict so many people who are caught up in all these insane ideologies. We need to have anti-gravity. We need to have different things. We need to have 24/7 energy panels that pull energy from infrared energy instead of just relying on intermittent sunlight and clouds that cover up the sun at nighttime. We need to have energy 24/7 pulling from infrared. All these are technologies that I have investigated on my show. I am actually trying to show people just my favorites that I've collected, those few, that those are examples of the things that conservatives or Christians or so forth should be talking about at their conferences. This is the things that they should be investigating. This is the things that they should be getting engineers to develop together and figure out how to crowdfund or whatever and bring these things and scale them up so that society can have them. And when we do those things, what happens is the gods of the city will lose their luster. Right now, we have these false messiahs and these.
Okay, let me get back to this in just a minute here. Hold on, gotta unmute. Let me get back to this in just a minute here. So to tie in what I was saying earlier about what would you be doing in Kapistan and why aren't you doing it? What would you be doing in Christendom and why aren't you doing it? So he's talking about, he's running through these lists of different technologies, different fields of scientific innovation, and he's identifying correctly that scientific innovation is and should be the territory of the church. That Christians should be leading the way in all of these different fields. This is where our time and effort and energy should be focused. And I'm gonna keep a lot of this stuff kind of anonymous for now because just for a variety of reasons. But I have started working with some people who are trying to innovate on a front that's kind of tangential to some of the stuff he's listing off here. Um, they've got a very, very interesting project that will, if as successful as it seems like it could be, it will radically transform the way that we organize ourselves as people. And he, the guy that's kind of running point on it, used to like he became interested in this field as a libertarian, an anarchist, pursuing this for idealistic reasons. And he was in a whole bunch of different libertarian spheres. And he was like, "Hey, I've got this really cool solution. This is something that we can actually take control of and work on now, and we can innovate in this front, and we can I don't want to describe things in a negative in a way that could be taken as inappropriate. So we could be doing these sorts of things here instead of railing against the state. Then we could be innovating. Fill in the end of the phrase. Um, and he took it to these people on libertarian forums and stuff, and he would post like, "Hey, here's this amazing advancement that could allow this technological development that could drastically change aspects of taxes and give you the ability to have more control over how much you're taxed." And he would post it, and there was crickets, no interaction, no one cared. Someone would post something about, "Oh, the map," and they'd get 4,000 comments and tons of interaction. That's where everybody was focused. And he finally was like, "These are just not serious people. These are children. These are children just playing on the internet. These are not serious people." And he's put his money where his mouth is, and he's getting ready to launch things here in the next few to several months. And there's a very good likelihood that this is gonna blow up, and it's going to tangibly. It's first of all, it's going to make him very, very wealthy. It's going to set up his family for generations, and it's going to provide valuable solutions across a whole different bunch of environmental sectors, environment and other sectors. And many, many, many people are going to benefit from it tremendously. It could fundamentally transform the lives of many people because he put his money where his mouth is and began innovating. Meanwhile, all of the people who claimed to care about this issue were just sitting around, passing around links and arguing about arcane things, about how pissed off and upset they were that there was nobody out doing exactly this sort of thing. And I see that same proclivity. This is not something that's restricted to libertarians. I see this exact same proclivity even among people who are not libertarian or haven't been libertarian. It's this I think is a fundamental human reality, that we get distracted by our own victimhood status, and we want to spend time groveling in that rather than getting up off the ground and stepping out and taking risks and doing things to tangibly profit ourselves and our family and change the world and live out our values. This is the David Gronowski that this gets me real excited when he talks like this. He's got more coming here, so I'm going to play that.
Institutions you're talking about that are pulling all of us down because they seem to be the only thing in town that has any kind of energy or anything going on. But all they sell us is guilt and self-hatred, right? And so my point is, we have to show that the gods of the city don't scratch the itch as well as the real thing. Does that make sense?
That's really like, I really, really like that. Like, man, there's definitely this brilliant alignment between everything I've been thinking about with Nietzsche recently and this, because this sort of Christian futurism energy is like hyped, man. I don't really find many people who are talking like this. This is really good. I really, really like it. The power of Christ is that he sets you free from, in some sense, the psychological drama that's so easy for us to get like sucked up into. And you're basically saying, listen, think about the world we could have,
right,
where we could have free fucking energy.
Right.
We could be Superman. We could be the Ubermensch. You know, Ray Pete, super thyroid, blasted out of her face, eyes dilated all day, 400 IQ, 20 babies each, and all this type of stuff. Like this is possible. But what we have now is that as the culture declines and loses its vitality, people are getting siloed. We're going onto Twitter and bickering about like our political enemies, and we're getting lost up in all these demographic wars and stuff like this. And it's like we're getting sucked back into the lower gods, the gods of the city, as you said. We're getting sucked back in, and eventually those scapegoat mechanisms are going to kick into gear properly. There was a trans girl or trans person who walked in and shot all those Christian kids. There's obviously going to be responses in the opposite direction to stuff like this, and that spiraling energy is starting to kind of clash. And you're basically saying, like, you know, if we fuck this up, yeah, that's going to just start to get out of control, and then you're going to have a lot of bad stuff happen. But it doesn't have to be that way. Like, Christ set you free from all that stuff. It's just that you won't repent. You won't actually allow him to do the thing that he's able to do, which is set you free so you can go pursue Tesla's 0 point.
Why are you afraid to talk about low temperature nuclear energy? Because you're mimetically owned. That's my point. Why are you squawking on Twitter 24/7 instead of figuring out how to become great? Because you're mimetically owned. You want to get that attention economy to give you some love. As my friend Cyprian was saying yesterday, we want to have what the others have. When you are free from that, when I'm talking about repentance, you are truly what the Uberman or whatever, you can do that, right? Because you're not worried about what people think. How many people don't want to talk about Einstein in a critical way because they're afraid that that's not cool, and they don't have anything to actually provide? They're afraid that they'll be labeled one thing or another. How many people are actually afraid to talk in a way that's truly original? They've always got to use all the catchphrases everybody else is using online. How many people are afraid to actually do things like talk about CETO? I talk about CETOs on my show all the time, and not just, it's a little trendy little Twitter thing that's like, but that's not the real thing. I mean, it really does actually have a link to 90% of the chronic illnesses if you look at it. And like people, everybody is so caught up in the meme world that they don't want to actually be a man and actually get out there and do things, right? You know, like get out there, you want to farm, go farm. I mean, I'm friends with Joel Salatin. I'm learning how to do this regenerative agriculture stuff from him and others like that. Get out there and become a part of the real world. And then you'll see how your talents can be used in a way that can glorify God, which you were made in the image to do. We were meant to subdue the world. There's no more vital energy than the creative power of being made in the image of the creative God that created this universe. There's no more, you don't need any more vital energy from a philosophy. What you need is to be clear and to repent and to turn away from all of this fixation on mimetic reciprocity. Like, instead of chasing after Andrew Tate, study Jesus Christ, right? Instead of chasing after, I want a fancy t-shirt. How much of your life is spent trying to get a t-shirt and it's such a waste of time. It's meaningless, right? That's where you need a little Ecclesiastes. But then you go back and you say, okay, so what can I do? Do what Jesus did. Deal with people at their material pain. Heal the sick, feed the poor. And it doesn't mean, I'm not talking about, don't get caught up in the liberal mindset. The liberalism is a mutation of Christianity too, okay? Let's not blame all these rip-off wannabes. Let's not, just like Nietzsche has a lot of rip-offs and wannabes, right? A lot of people that take him into different directions. Let's not blame Jesus for all the rip-off wannabes, liberalism, and all these different things that take his things and mutate it into a cheap rip-off that wants to supplant the real thing. Let's just recover the real master of history and then imitate him and not be scared to talk about elemental transmutation because, oh, that's alternative energy. That's weird. That's like Alex Jones. Oh, I'm scared. But Alex Jones is cool because he's a meme now because he makes loud noises. But like, that's the only way we can receive Alex Jones. We can't actually like talk about hour 4 of Alex Jones that never gets clipped where he's talking about alternative energy because that's like weird. And that's like trying to care too much about like reality. Let's just stay in the meme world. That's where our generation is, man. You know what I'm saying? They want to take a high energy guy like Alex Jones and say, that's a meme. Isn't it cute that there's somebody that does this little character thing? They don't even believe in vitality. You know what I mean? Like it's a gimmick now, right?
It's entertainment. It's like,
instead of actually just doing it, and just being it. And not everybody's going to have the high energy of an Alex Jones. Not everybody's going to have the broad shoulders to take the arrows, but you can at least support people who are doing things like that. And there's people all around, but you have to do the research to find out who they are. Ray Pete was one of them. His legacy will live on. I had him on the show before he passed away. Died on Thanksgiving. Yeah, he died on Thanksgiving. This past Thanksgiving. But you know what I mean? His legacy is going to go forward, Yeah.
That's brilliant. Like the actual frame that you have there, I think is just money now. I really, really like it. Really impressed. It's absolutely fantastic. One last thing we could talk about, and then I'll probably have to go after this, is maybe we could talk about Nietzsche's death and his struggle with
talk about that.
because I've been thinking about this a bit. He often talks about Dionysus, and
All right, there. I had to play just a little bit more of it just to give you guys a tease so you can go listen to that yourselves. Um, the phrase that I just had to let the whole thing run out because I love it when David gets on a rant like that. Um, but the phrase mimetically owned, that's a good one. That's a good one to keep in mind. And when you're feeling the desire to blackpill or doomer post or act like the best isn't yet to come, then recognize that you are acting out your mimetic ownedness. That you are, when you blackpill, you are being the mouthpiece of Satan. And you are in a spot of negative mimetic rivalry with Christ. Yes, there are evil people in the world. There are people who are going to do evil things. I'm not saying you can't talk about it. I'm not saying not to bring it up or be aware of it or um and if you have like unique strategies for countering specific people's agendas, then by all means, talk about that and advocate those. But there's this spirit of just like this is a thing that drove me away from the church I grew up in, where it was like the forces of evil are so amassed against us that all we have left to do is just pray and hope to survive the end times kind of attitude. That there's no point in trying to raise up or elevate or glorify this world because this world is fallen and everything is going to burn in fire and then we'll go to heaven. And like it when your theology gets wacky, then you get bizarre patterns of behavior. But that it's a very Gnostic idea that all that matters is what's happening in kind of the spiritual world, and that this world is of lesser value or of lesser import than than the spiritual warfare. No, we were made as people with bodies, with material bodies. We live in a material world. Jesus has a material body. Jesus has male genitalia and will for all of eternity. Material is not of lesser value than the spiritual. There's always opportunity and potential for growth and peace and happiness. And if you're not building something, then I don't want to hear about how scared or stressed or worried or black-pilled, depressed you are. I'm saying this to myself too, that if you aren't actively involved in building something, and that something could be yourself, you may need to start with yourself. That's where I'm at. I'm starting on building myself because I'm at the bottom. I'm at the bottom rung. I am just getting started, and I have to start with myself. I have a whole bunch of stuff with myself that needs rebuilt before I can even start trying to extend out into other things. So you could be at any point along this ladder. If you're at the bottom, maybe you need to start with yourself. Maybe you need to start with your own mind. Maybe you need to start with your body. Maybe you need to do both because you are a mind and a body. Maybe you're further along. Maybe you've got your shit together, generally speaking, and you need a project. Maybe you have a lot of money. You've got financial security. You own land. You've got a family. If you've ascended many of these ladders, then maybe you don't need to be focused on the lower level, like acquire the skills, the basic skills to sustain yourself. You can go up to the higher levels. All right, now how do I amass the resources, the skills, the assets necessary to sustain lots of people? First, you amass the resources, the skills, the effort, the whatever you need to sustain yourself. Next, you do the same to sustain your family. and then you expand out from there. If you have things that you can be doing to amass resources, equip yourself to actually take on some of these projects, whether it's if you have the scientific inclinations yourself and you want to go do that, then great. Or if you want to finance or fund the people who want to do that, or if you're not even into the scientific side of stuff, you don't even want to go that way. That's the stuff that interests me. That's why I think and talk about that. You could be invested in building charity organizations or groups, or like an example here, Joshua Ham. He says, I'm working to get 12 acres food self-sufficient. Once I learn this skill, I want to sell the land, start over with 100 acres of raw land, and build an orphanage to train young men who's those skills and virtues. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Joshua was farther along on a lot of these things. He's thinking big. He's figured out how to be able to sustain himself, and now he can begin piling on that. He's got a family. He can sustain his family. He's active in his community. He can start piling these bricks up. This is the to be meta here. This is the king pilled. This is what it means to be king pilled. This is the remember the whatever the Chat GPT said about what being king pilled is. I don't even remember. I don't even care. But this is what it is. I'll put this out here, and maybe eventually Chat GPT will start scouring audio, and it'll get this, and it'll be able to tell you that the king pilled message is exactly what Joshua is talking about here. That's the gist of the thoughts that I had here for today. Let me catch up on some of these comments and see if there's anything else here. The best is yet to come. The Patriots are in control. That's right. Tyler says intent is very important, and much of the black pill perspective is a result of the need to feed the passions. Yeah, I don't know. I've tried to analyze why I've fallen into those things, and I think oftentimes people want to imagine that the problems confronting them are so big that they couldn't possibly be expected to solve them. And so there's a part of our nature that wants to make mountains out of molehills, essentially. Because if it was a molehill, then yeah, you could be expected to solve the problem yourself. But if it's a mountain, oh well, there's nothing I can do. This is the libertarian mentality. Look how evil it is. Look how vast the evil conspiracies are. Look how expansive it is. Look at how there's nothing you can do. You can't get away from them no matter what you do. Every single task that you set your mind to, you're going to have to deal with them. They've tapped into everything. They're watching you. Everywhere you go, they're coming for you. You got to live and you got to hide. You got to be afraid. That's the mentality. This is doomer posting. This is the mouthpiece of Satan. It's fine to be cautious. Being cautious and protecting your interests, yeah, that's great. But there's a clear line where it goes from being cautious to being like actively like spreading fear and panic. This is just not a healthy mentality at all. It's explicitly anti-Christian, because the Christian message is one of hope. David points out earlier in the conversation, he has this phrase. He says that the Bible starts in a garden and ends in a city. It's very interesting. The Bible starts in a garden. Man is told to subdue the earth and to exercise dominion over it. And then the end of the story is in a city. So technology is built throughout that process. The city is technology. So technology is not inherently evil. And it's in fact part of exercising dominion over the earth is using technology and innovating in technology. Stephen says, in that sense, does it eventually suggest that there may have to be physical war as there is spiritual warfare? And who do we look to as the leaders to raise that flag? Yeah, there always have been physical wars. And I think the nature of the wars change, but there's always going to be physical wars. There's always going to be warfare. As to who are the leaders for that, I would say if you don't see one, then start working on becoming one. And in the process of doing that, either you will become that leader or you'll run across the person who is that leader because he's taking the same path as you. Joshua says, we won't be able to know in advance who the leaders will be. We judge people by their fruits. If their actions result in peace, order, and the classical virtues of good, truth, and beauty. Yes. Blackpilled. Yeah. Spire says, blackpilled, equals lack of faith. God's conceptual horizon is much greater than any of ours. Yes, absolutely. Welcome, Spires. I don't think I've seen you in here before. Okay. Yes, there's a great point. Satoshi didn't write a paper calling to end the Fed. He created Bitcoin. That's exactly what I'm talking about. That's the perfect in one sentence. If you could sum this entire episode up in one sentence, it would be random username. Satoshi didn't write a paper calling to end the Fed. He created Bitcoin. We're going to end it on that here today, guys. Thank you for showing up. Do all the like, share, subscribe, do all that stuff. I've got another episode coming, I think, here on Saturday. I'm going to be doing another one. Don't know exactly what it's going to be on yet, but I've got a few different options, maybe a guest. Got a couple different things to a couple little strings to pull on and see what comes of it. So once again, let me throw the little graphic up here for you guys. You can remember these streams turned into 2 streams today. Both streams were sponsored by Fox and Sons Coffee. And fans of this show, King Pilled, you can use code KING and you'll receive 18% off orders of $25 or more at Fox and Sons. That's FOXNSONS.com. And then shipping is always free on orders of $37.99 or more. And I would say take advantage of that free shipping because when you taste this coffee, it's going to be phenomenal. You're going to recognize, okay, this is legitimately good coffee, and having good coffee matters. And then, like I said at the beginning of what was actually the first stream, because the stream broke in the middle of the day today, the reason that Fox and Sons is the sponsor of the show is because he's not just offering a great product; he's doing exactly what I talked about in the show to here today, exactly what David is advocating, where he's saying, go innovate, go create something, go build something. He's building a company with his sons, teaching them the virtues of creativity and developing a product, creating a business, marketing yourself, providing value to other people, and then controlling the source of your income in the process. He is a living embodiment of the King Pilled message. That's why I wanted them to be supporters, sponsors of this show. So support them, support Stephen Fox and his sons, support a mission of fatherhood, and get yourself some good coffee in the process. So once again, foxandsons.com, FOXNSONS, and use code KING. And I guess you guys are going to get a little, you get to see Eastwood here just before I wrap up. You want to come be on the camera? All right. You want to talk to Blippy? Yeah, Blippy isn't here right now. You can talk to Daddy's friends. Do you want to say hi? Are you ready for bed? No? Does Mommy think you're ready for bed? Yeah, I think she does. No? You like the microphone? That's cool, huh? All right. Well, I think we need to go get you in bed, mister. Say Fox and Sons Coffee. Can you say that? No? Can you say Fox? Yeah. So say Fox and Sons Coffee. Say Fox and Sons. All right. You want to do it? You guys are getting the Eastwood experience. Say Fox and Sons. All right. You want to go see Mommy? I'll be there in just a minute, okay? All right. Well, you guys got the Eastwood experience. That is very much what it is like. Anyways, thank you guys. Thank you for watching and listening and whatever else. And go listen to that Uber Boyo David Gronowski thing, the whole thing, because I mean, I gave you like 25 minutes out of a 2 hour and 41 minute stream that is just absolutely phenomenal.